Good morning, everyone. This is Jay with dailytexture.com. This morning, I am playing with some flower photos. I did a blog post over the weekend that talks about the top texture collections you can use with your flower photos. So, I will put a link to that in the description of this video. But everything is in bloom here, except these are not in bloom yet. In fact, I think we lost some of the coneflowers over the winter, so we've planted some more. But they will be in bloom. And I pulled one of these photos from last year. And one of the collections that surprised me the most in my project of finding the top collections to use with flower photos is the Island Dreams collection. And these were designed primarily to use with coastal things, birds, coastal images, things like that. They have coastal colors. But it surprised me that they worked really well with flowers. So I decided to take this coneflower and start masking away its background to see if this works again. You'll notice in the blog post I did irises, which are blooming now. But I wanted to try a different flower. So in my very old software, I'm just going to mask this away. Of course, if you have Photoshop, you can probably do this a lot easier and a lot faster than I do. But I just wanted to do this kind of quickly with this particular background because it had the same pink as the petals. So I got to go around these edges here. But you know, one of the questions I get asked the most is, especially with new people who are new to using textures, is what collections are the best to use with my flower photos? And to be honest, I take photos of flowers, but I don't usually make a lot of art with them. I do some, but I can't resist taking a picture of a beautiful flower. But my primary goal when I'm out shooting is birds and wildlife. But I will photograph flowers. And it's hard for me to answer somebody when they ask that question because I have so many collections, which when you go to the blog post, you will see I am highlighting 30 collections which work well with flowers. And I decided to finally tackle that and answer the question, but I had to do it myself to see which ones are the best with flowers. And I was pleasantly surprised with this one because, like I said, this is more designed for coastal images is what I had in mind when I created these textures for this collection. There is a lot of variation, though, in the textures that will make them work with flowers, even if you don't use the whole texture. And that's another thing I want to bring up. A lot of people think they have to use the whole texture as is, and that's not true. You can, if you just want to use this portion of a texture, like here on the right side, you could enlarge the texture background. They're high resolution enough to be able to do that. Or you could make the flower smaller and move it over and just use that part and then crop it out to this area that you want. So you don't always have to use the textures as they're presented. You can also alter the colors of textures, flip them around. Like for instance, let's say I didn't want the pink there. I could go to the texture layer and I could flip it around, which I usually do after masking to decide the best placement. But I like to mask first. So I put the flower on top, and as you can see, I still have a lot of dark here around the edges. So I'm going to adjust my opacity and get a little bit bigger brush and come in and try to soften that around these edges. Now this takes a little while, but it's well worth it. It's a lot like painting. But once you get rid of that halo, whether it be a dark halo or a light halo, it blends in a lot better. And I like to come right over the edges of things and soften them as I'm going along. To me, that just adds to the wispiness and the allure of the image. But the dark halos, because this had a dark background, those need to go on this light background. We don't need those showing. So I'm just going right over top, and if I go over a petal too much, I can reverse the mask and bring that petal back a little bit. But I just like to try to get rid of as much of the dark as I can. And I might even decide I don't need a petal. This petal here looks kind of awkward. Or I can reshape a petal by trimming it up, like so. Now it looks a little better. But this is very meditative, and it's a lot like painting, which I love to do. And I like to do that with my photo art as well. Even if I don't do a full painting, I like that feeling and experience of the painting by sitting here and doing this. And it doesn't take that long once you get used to your software, your masking, the opacity, how to change the size of your brush, etc. Once you do it enough times, it just becomes natural. Look at the dark edges are disappearing as I do this at a low opacity, and I just keep going over and over it in the same area until I get it looking like I want. Since I don't want the dark halos showing. Go right down the edge of the stem here, and I'll probably see, I went over the stem right there. If I want to bring that back, I reverse my mask, which in Photoshop you'd be doing black and white paint. And I'll probably get a big brush here in a minute and go over the stem, not completely, but just fade it out. The main thing here on the image is the flower and these beautiful colors in it, in those petals. I love coneflowers. I really love them when a butterfly or a bee lands on them, or even a bird. My birds love them. And I just soften these edges the best I can to get rid of that dark halo. I would do the same if it was a super bright halo, and it'll vary from image to image. But like after I do this, if I wanted to try a different background behind the flower, I could just go to the texture layer, import another background under there, under the flower, and tried some different backgrounds and adjust the mask as necessary, which is what makes masking wonderful, because you're not erasing. You can always bring it back or take more away. Go right in over those petals a little bit. This petal is further behind, so I can actually soften that a little more. I'm going to lower the opacity a little bit more and make the brush a little bigger and just tap, which puts that more in the background. And I'm going to do that around the edge of the flower and this other petal back here, to make the ones further behind as if they're just fading in. Creates a really nice, soft transition between the flower and I'm going right over the edges of all the petals now. But it really helps to blend it with the background. And I know I'm going over this top part a lot, which took away some of the detail of this part of the flower. But I'm going to go back and bring that back. Right now I want a big brush and tap around the bottom of the stem to fade that in. I want a hint of it there to show it's still there. Okay, now let me zoom in on this top part. And see, I masked over these quite a bit, so I'm going to go back with a really tiny brush and bring some of these back where I masked over those too much. But I had to do that in order to get these little in-between areas properly. So I go ahead and mask over them, and then I bring back what I want to bring back. And by doing it at a low opacity, you can go over and over and over one spot until you get it just the way you want. If you do it at full opacity, it might look kind of awkward right at first. But this way, it's just like painting with a paintbrush. With my Wacom tablet pen as my brush. That helps bring back some of the detail of those areas. So they'll stand out nicely. And I just keep going over them until they look the way I want. Now let me zoom back out and take a look as a whole at the image. Oh, that looks very lovely. And once again, I'm really surprised with this background. Let's see if we can pick another one from that collection just to see what it may look like. Here's one with a lot of the purple in it. Ooh, that's kind of neat too, but it's a little bit too much of that color. And you can always play with the opacity of the layer if you want to mix two of them together. But I think that one's a little strong. I think I'll stick with the first one I had with this bit of pink right here. Now what I like to do is duplicate this texture layer, put it on top, and put it on soft light, and then play with opacity. Just slide it back and forth. And you see it helps adjust the lighting and brings a little bit more of the color from the texture into the flower. And I kind of like to go somewhere between 30 and 100%. This may be a little bit misty right here where the stem is. I might have masked away too much of that. So let me go back to my stem and bring back a little bit of that. And then there. Now I've kind of lost this back petal and this back petal, but you know what? I don't think there's a hint of it still showing. So it's like it's fading into this background. And that's kind of the look I was going for. But this process I just did with putting the background behind the flower, doing the masking, and then putting the background on top in soft light mode is the same process I did in the blog post for all 32 images. I did 32 images, and they're all of the same flower, but they show you what they look like with all of the different texture backgrounds I chose from different sets. So I'm going to put the link in there, and I encourage you to go check it out if you like to work with flowers. It will really help you as a guideline to maybe think of some things you hadn't thought of or create some looks that you haven't explored creating before. And I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you have a lot of beautiful flowers this season to work with, and you will have fun working with the various collections. Oh, and by the way, I have put all of the collections I recommend in the blog post. I have put them all on sale for a May sale. Now I know it's still April, but I went ahead and did it anyway, and they will remain on sale through the end of May at the discounted prices. And so, you can get a good deal on them through the end of May and really have fun exploring some interesting art with your flowers. And I hope you find it helpful. As always, thanks for watching, and I hope you guys have a great day.